Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 23 playthrough of the Colorado Rockies. Thanks so much for watching this episode. I really appreciate all of the viewers. If you haven't subscribed, would sincerely appreciate it if you do it now. Love to read the comments down below. And if you can give the video a thumbs up, we'd appreciate that also. We're getting close to OOTP 24 time, hopefully, when we'll have a entirely new playthrough going probably within the next couple of months. Interested in hearing more from the folks at Out of the Park Developments about what's going on with that. Probably will hopefully hear something in the next week or two, but anything that you can help us do to help more people find our videos is, as I said, sincerely appreciated. And we are at the midway point of the 2051 season, Saturday, July 1st, as you can see there. And the Rockies at 50-33 have the best record in baseball, just barely. But we've gotten there in a very strange way. We got off to a pretty sickly 16-27 start. And since then, we have been 34-6. So we have been playing some incredible baseball over the course of the second half of May and all of June to get to this spot in the standings. Taking a look at those complete standings, as I mentioned, we barely have the best record in baseball. With our .602 winning percentage, puts us just percentage points ahead of the Marlins. Our goal is absolutely to win the NL West and earn a first-round bye. And it's been a while since I did our last episode in terms of actually putting it together. Those all happened last weekend, so appreciate all of the comments and suggestions that were made on those episodes. This is my first time to kind of catch up on those, sometimes depending on my work schedule or how lazy and derelict a father and husband I want to be. I can crank through a few episodes over the course of the weekend and then have them stacked up to post during the week, and that's what happened last week. But it is Saturday morning now, and I will be posting this episode later Saturday, possibly even this morning, if not certainly in the afternoon. So just wanted to touch briefly on some of the comments that I've gotten and circle back on some of the suggestions. Recently got a comment that it's pretty important with the Rockies' unique home field and the fact that we have built a home field advantage that seems pretty good at this point, 29-12 at home. We're only 500 on the road, that we earn the home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And I think that is an absolutely great goal for us to have. As I said, if we get a first-round bye with one of the top two records in the National League, I'm not going to view the year as a failure by any means. Certainly would love to avoid those wild card series if at all possible. But I do think with the uniqueness of our ballpark and the uniqueness of the pitching staff that we've put together, that getting the home field advantage over the second half of the season would be optimal. We also got some suggestions to go with a 12-man pitching staff coming out of spring training. We did not do that, but you can see now we are down to a 12-man pitching staff. We do have a lot of stamina on our team in terms of our pitchers. So not so long ago when we kind of shuffled the roster and really kind of got this team headed in the right direction, we did send Will Lucio down to AAA. He's pitching there, quite honestly, somewhat similarly, at least in terms of his ERA plus, even not so much his FIP minus. He's been pretty solid in AAA, but he's turned into a starter down there, given that he does have decent stamina and 4 pitches, not quite good enough to be a starter at the major league level, but hopefully we will have him back soon. But we are going with the 12-man pitching staff for now. Had gotten some suggestions through the course of the preseason and quite honestly even just the beginning of last offseason to bump the ticket prices to $30. I believe that was from Three Quarters Badger. You could see that when we were struggling early in the year, our ticket price of $29 even seemed excessive, but in recent weeks as we've been playing really well and fan interest has been strong, been selling out more often than not, Our revenue per game is supposed to be up about 7% this year. We are going to right now bump the ticket price up to $30 following that suggestion. Just a little too late, but hopefully that'll allow us to generate a little more revenue. You can see expected to get up to about 11% more than a year ago if we keep selling tickets at the pace that we have been so far. Certainly no guarantees that we'll do that, but certainly if we remain a strong team and in competition for the playoffs, would think that we're going to be 45, 50,000 a game most days and nights here in Colorado. And one of the last comments that I've got over the last week or so from you great viewers is that our catcher position is tenuous, and I agree with that. It's actually very good right now. It's just that both of our players, Victor Gonzalez and Demetrius Williams, are in their 30s, and they're both going to be free agents after this year. Victor Gonzalez has been our starter. We fortunately, when we picked him up in that trade with Tampa Bay, got them to keep the majority of his contract. I believe it was 70%. Yep. So we've been paying him, a little less than $7 million a year. Still a really nice bat. Has 15 homers already with a .284 batting average, but he's trending towards being an average defensive catcher. And given what we're trying to do with our pitching staff, and given that we're already playing in such a difficult park for pitchers, it's tough for me to think that we're going to bring him back next year. Last I checked, he was looking for around $13.6 million for 4 years. So he's willing to take a pay cut. I just don't know if I want a basically average defensive catcher to be our cornerstone next year. So we've got to think about him. And then we've also got to think about our backup, Demetrius Williams, also a backup, also a player who we picked up in trade, whose previous team is keeping the majority of his contract. He's a little better defensively at this point. Not quite as good a hitter, but still has been very productive this year with a .301 average and 6 homers and 73 at-bats as our backup. But he's fragile physically, and he too is looking for pretty decent money, about $9 million for next 2 seasons each year, if he's going to re-up with us. And given that he's fragile, given that he's going to turn 32 before the end of the season, and he's an above-average defensive catcher, but not a great defensive catcher, I don't know that that's the direction that we want to go for the long term either. But I would like to perhaps get somebody on board that may be able to help us down the line. So what I did was search for catchers who are really good defensively, with plus power, and at least are close to competent in their contact, in their eye. And you can see there's only 4 of those players in the majors. Andres Coronel is a guy we know well from our time with Pittsburgh. He's making a lot of money. We tried to trade for him, and honestly, with the difficult financial situation we are in and the difficult financial situation the Pirates are in, there's just no way financially to execute a trade. Bobby Rivera and Rich Pacina. Pacina is signed for 8 years to pretty big money. Bobby Rivera is a free agent. The costs on both of them are pretty prohibitive. But Alex Alvarez, who, at least according to the dreaded star ratings, is the least accomplished and least capable of these players, is available at a not unreasonable cost. He's a guy who the Tigers actually picked up in the Rule 5 about 3.5 years ago, and he's become their starting catcher. 28 years old. He's signed for the next 3.5 years. The biggest number is less than $6 million, so it's not a horrible contract. He's an Iron Man, so he's going to be out there every day. He's very good defensively with 70 ability and a 60 arm. Got a good personality, high leadership and work ethic, which I love to see in a catcher. The issue is his bat. He has some home run power, so I think he will have the capability to probably hit 15 to 20 homers at least if he was playing every day in Colorado. His contact and his eye, honestly, the three ratings, the 45 contact, the 55 home run power, and the 45 eye are the bare minimum we were looking for in any of those categories as far as our search. He doesn't strike out much, which is nice, and his gap power is below average, but he's got no speed anyways, so he's not going to be legging out a bunch of extra base hits. Actually, a little surprised he's had a triple in each of the last 3 years. But I think if we can get him for a package that is not excessive to take over as our backup catcher right now, it does give us an opportunity to at least know we've got one catcher on board for next year who certainly has the durability to likely go out and play every day and is also going to be likely the best defensive catcher on our team. So if we got into a situation where we had to start him, we could. What I'm interested in bringing him on board and finding out, even if he's in a backup role this year, is he going to hit a $160 in Colorado, or is he going to hit 230 in Colorado? And if he hits 230 in Colorado with plus power in that defense, he's a pretty useful player. If he hits a $160, clearly a potential train wreck. You know, looking at his career stats, though, he's put up a 90 OPS plus and an 87 WRC plus over the course of his career. The bad news is he's been steadily trending in the wrong direction in both of those metrics as he's gotten older and more experienced. But the good news is that despite a batting profile that doesn't look all that impressive, he's been not all that far from a league average offensive player in terms of his OPS plus and his WRC plus. And with that glove, I think he could be a pretty useful player. So we're going to see if maybe we can address the coming issue at catcher ahead of time. Again, I really like our catcher situation right now with Gonzalez and Williams. But since they're both going to be free agents at the end of this year, and right now I'm not inclined to pay either of them the money that they're looking for, I think potentially trying to get rid of one of them and bring on board a guy who we may be able to build around a little bit more for the next few years makes sense. And I think we've pieced together a deal that makes sense, and Detroit's actually going to retain 70% of that fairly modest contract, but every penny that we can save ourselves is helpful. You can see they've got tons of budget space available, so they're pretty willing to do it. We're still going to be in a negative cash position after making this trade that would take off some salary. So we have to give up our backup catcher, Demetrius Williams, who is definitely a better offensive player, but he's not as good defensively. He's fragile, he's older, and he's in the final year of his contract. So even though we're going to lose a little offensively, I don't mind doing that. And then the rest of the guys we have to give up are basically just allowing us to have the Tigers retain a little bit of cash. I don't think there's any game changers here. Second baseman, Jerry Aguiar, nice speed, never going to be a major league hitter. Decent glove, but not great. Jorge Vasquez, 22-year-old right fielder. You know, again, a fourth or fifth outfielder, a decent bat, decent corner outfielder. He's durable, but he's not great. Victor Lambert, another 22-year-old second baseman. Like the glove, like the defensive versatility, has a little bit of speed. He's a leader in the clubhouse, which is nice, but he just can't hit at the major league level, and I don't think he'll ever be able to. And then starting pitcher John Cox, who is only 20 years old, just does not have the profile of someone who's ever going to be a major league pitcher, and particularly with that brutal potential movement on his pitches and his extreme fly ball tendencies, never going to make it pitching in Denver. So I don't mind including all those players to get them to keep a little more of Alvarez contract. And I think that it makes sense for us. Like I said, we're taking a little bit of a hit to our offense this year, but it's the bat of a backup catcher. I don't think with the number one offense in baseball, granted, boosted by playing in Coors, admittedly, but I don't think that having a bit weaker bat from our backup catcher is going to determine the course of this season for the Rockies. And as I mentioned, Alvarez is younger, he's more durable, he's better defensively, and he's signed for the next 3 years after this one. So we feel like we've got our backup catcher set for the next several seasons. And as I talked about earlier, it's also possible that Alvarez actually is our starter. If he proves that he can hit a little bit in Colorado with that excellent glove, you could do worse things, I think, than having Alex Alvarez as a starter working with your pitching staff in that park over the next few years. So we're going to go ahead and complete that trade, which I think hopefully sets us up a little bit better for our catcher position for next year. Obviously, it has to, since we actually now have a major league catcher who is signed for the 2052 season, as opposed to nobody signed. Looks like the fans also like us bringing Alvarez on board. Got a 1-point bump in fan interest. Not the most exciting thing in the world, but better than a 1-point move in the wrong direction. And with that tiny bump to fan interest and the fact that we're playing some incredible baseball right now and we're selling out most days, we actually bumped the ticket prices up $1 more to $31. I don't like to game the system too much on these and change them all that much during the season, but we haven't even played a game since we moved it from 29, so it's really just one change that's going through in my mind, but we'll see if hopefully that allows us to generate even more revenue for ownership. Our owner is a pretty good personality, and his focus is more on winning instead of making money. That said, we want to make sure that this team delivers on the field. Hopefully, if we have a successful season, maybe even winning that championship that he'd like us to do, that's a formal team goal for next year, by next year. And it's also the goal he gave us for this season at the start of the year. You know, if we can perhaps win that, or at least to get very close to it, there's a chance that we'll get a nice bump in the budget next season. Have not often played with owners with generous fiscal personalities, so I don't know how generous is generous, but as we've talked about in previous episodes, we ultimately ended up with a jump from 200 to 250 in the first year of his ownership, which is a pretty significant step forward as far as I'm concerned. And with that, we're going to really start moving through this episode. Basically just going to cover the month of July here. As far as international amateurs, we have made an offer today to Roger Gonzalez. Really nice potential bat, durable. Doesn't bring a lot to the table defensively, but feel like he was the best potential prospect out there. We've got the All-Star game coming up soon. We've got the amateur draft coming up relatively soon. And then we've also got the trade deadline, obviously, at the end of this month. Just made that trade for the catcher position, for the backup catcher. Given that we don't have any money to take on contracts right now, I don't know how much we're going to be doing. A lot depends on how the month of July goes, whether we have any significant injuries, whether we continue winning and playing great baseball. But I don't feel like we need to make a ton of changes to this team right now, but clearly if there's an opportunity to improve ourselves, we are in win now mode, and we will do what we can to improve ourselves, just maybe a little tricky with no actual money to spend to take on contracts. And I was commenting at the end of our last episode how the Rockies had been incredibly healthy this year. I don't think we had had a player on the IL since training camp and spring training broke, but that has changed now. And unfortunately, it's Vinny Gutierrez, who we just moved into the starting rotation, going to be out with a herniated disc for 6 weeks. He had been pitching really well out of the bullpen for us. You can see he's only started one game for us, but we did move him into the starting rotation, replacing Chase Crawford. Unfortunately, Gutierrez is now going to have to go to the IL. We've got an obvious replacement for him in AAA with Will Lucio, so we'll bring Lucio right back up. Adjust our roster, see what manager wants to do. I don't want to put Crawford back into the rotation now. We'll go with somebody else if that is ultimately what Hartman defaults to. Okay, and he doesn't want to put Crawford in, but he wants to put Victor Fields in. And I think I've talked about this in the last episode too. I don't want 4 lefties in the rotation and only 1 out of the bullpen. So Fields and Crawford are kind of the 2 guys who, to me, are ineligible to start right now. So I'll have to pick out between Colbert, Rodas, Mingo, and Lucio most likely. Which one of them I think it makes sense to move in. And see, they've all been reasonably proficient at the major league level this year. And I think we're going to give Danny Rodas the opportunity. He's pitched the best out of those 4 with a 3.06 ERA this year. And he's a guy that has been with us now for a year and a half, and we've never actually given him a start in 96 games with the team. Certainly has the stamina to start, has a 3-pitch arsenal, good movement on his pitches. He's a ground baller in terms of his ground ball, fly ball tendencies. I don't know that he's going to be great in that role, but it's a 5th starter role. I think it's fine for us to see what he can do over the next few weeks in that role. Certainly Colbert, Mingo, and Lucio are also options if he's a total disaster, but feel like we will give him the first opportunity to start over the next few weeks. And we made it to the All-Star announcement here, 55-35 record, so we've continued to play well. Assume we still have the best record in baseball. Yes, we do. Only up 2.5 on the Dodgers, so we're still going to be in a big battle with the Dodgers, Padres, and Giants, who all have much bigger budgets and payrolls than we do for the division. You can see some of our additions are doing great this year. Robbie Carrillo, second in the National League in batting. Elijah Moore, second in the National League in home runs. Those were both players that we picked up in pretty big and expensive trades for us. And then Bobby Perez, the rookie playing his first full year in the majors, is second in the National League in ribbies. So all 3 of those players really contributing and helping our lineup. And Javi Toledo, who was our big free agent acquisition, is 3rd in the National League with 11 wins, although his earned run average of 578, not particularly impressive so far. So we'd think that we're going to hear some of those names as being all-stars. Let's see who made it for our Rockies. Perhaps not shockingly, doesn't look like we have any pitchers on the all-star team. Catcher Victor Gonzalez, named an all-star for the 2nd straight year. Talked about him earlier, having a really good offensive season. We've got 2 first basemen. Elijah Moore, who we talked about, 2nd in the NL in homers in his first year. And Jamel Cohen, veteran, who we're going to be facing a big decision on his $18 million option. Those 2 have been splitting time at first base and designated hitter most of the year, but they both got the all-star nod at first base. Robbie Carrillo, who we talked about, all-star left fielder. And then Bobby Perez, the rookie, potential rookie of the year, I would think, all-star in right field. So 5 offensive players, not shockingly for a 55-win Colorado team on the all-star team. Right fielder Perez, who's going to be competing for rookie of the year. Left fielder Carrillo, and first baseman Moore, who could both be in the mix for MVP votes, probably along with Perez as well. Jamel Cohen, veteran first baseman, and Victor Gonzalez, veteran catcher, who could be in his last year with us. Also named to the All-Star team for the Colorado Rockies this year. And with the announcement of the All-Star teams, that brings us to the first-year player draft. Last season in this playthrough, we spent a ton of time on this because after our first season in the Rockies, when we were a 74-win team, we were projected to have the 12th pick in the draft, and we got extremely lucky in the draft lottery and moved up to third overall. So spent a ton of time thinking about this draft, the draft last year. Now coming off a 96 win season in a very different situation here. We're going to be picking 29th. So probably going to be less interesting players on the board when the draft finally does get to us towards the end of the first round, but still hope to add some talent that's going to help this rapidly accelerating rebuild of the Rockies continue to deliver good results on the field over the next several years. And we've simmed ahead to our 29th pick in the draft. We'll start off taking a look at a few of the starting pitchers who at least stand out based on the star ratings. Jaden Dunbar, high school player, barely 18 years old, lefty. He's durable as far as his injury proneness, really good stamina, pretty good at holding runners, ground ball pitcher with ground baller tendencies. Looks like he could definitely develop a 3-pitch arsenal of major league quality pitches with plus movement, plus control, and a little bit above average stuff. Certainly an interesting prospect, particularly with what we're trying to do in Colorado, focusing on ground baller pitchers with ground ball tendencies, with good movement on their pitches. Love the fact that he's durable. Love the stamina and the good hold runners rating. Would feel incredible about him if felt like he was going to have a 4-pitch arsenal. Certainly doesn't seem like that curveball is going to develop into something that he's going to want to be throwing much, if at all, at the major league level. I would assume a 30 curveball at the major league level is just constant hanging curveballs that guys are knocking 350, 400 feet. But don't know for sure. But he's certainly an interesting prospect for the 29th pick in the draft. Little lefty, but that was kind of what players like Ron Guidry were called, and they had, or he had, a pretty good career. Also looking for slot, and our slot, I believe, is a little over $4 million, so I think that's fine. Isaiah Batista, 18-year-old, also a lefty, also durable. A lot different in size, 6'9", 205. Like the work ethic, has the stamina to start. Potential 4-pitch arsenal. You never know if that change is going to develop, though, so could have a 3-pitch arsenal. Decent stuff, acceptable movement, acceptable control. Looking for more than slot, neutral tendencies. Not a bad pitching prospect, but I would certainly go with Dunbar over him. And then Alvin Cordova, normal injury proneness, another 18-year-old lefty starter. Kind of interesting that those are the 3 top pitchers left. Another guy with a potential 3-pitch arsenal, has the stamina to start, good at holding runners, plus stuff, plus movement, plus control. So 3 interesting pitching prospects. He's looking for the most money, Cordova, in the $9.5 million range. Would certainly go for Dunbar among those 3. The ground ball tendencies and the real good movement and plus control I like. He would be the guy that we go with if we decide to go with a pitcher, but I'm sure there are some position players that are going to make this an interesting decision for us. So we'll take a look at these top 6 position players and see if any of them can convince us that Dunbar, the young starting pitcher, is not the right way to go. Melvin Armenta, shortstop, durable high school player, pretty good glove. You could play him at shortstop. You'd love if the range and the error were a little higher, but he could be a competent, or better than competent, quite honestly, major league shortstop. He could be a good, solid defensive major league shortstop. Has some home run power, which would play really well in Colorado. Not the greatest contact hitter in the world, but would walk a bit. Definitely an interesting prospect, and he's not looking for all that much money. So Armenta, I would say, is in the mix. Catcher Alex Pineda, durable player. Fair amount of durable guys out there. Pretty average defensively, not a lot of speed. The bat is average-ish. 21-year-old coming out of Texas A&M. Not looking for all that much money, but he doesn't excite me all that much. I mean, certainly profiles is a really good really good backup catcher, but with that average defense, would not be someone that I'd want to be playing every day. Another shortstop in Jonathan Bellman. Like the high work ethic, overall a pretty good personality. Decent defensively, probably more of a natural second baseman with that weaker arm. Pretty interesting bat, could have plus contact, gap power, and home run power. Another college player coming out of Tulane. Not the worst prospect in the world by any stretch of the imagination. Luis Hernandez, 17-year-old out of Cuba. Doesn't really have a defensive position, but lots of home run power. He's kind of a pure bat. He's younger than a lot of the other guys, not going to be 18 until October, but have a hard time believing he's going to be the guy we go with. David Medina, third baseman, durable, high work ethic. Not the greatest glove in the world, certainly does have the arm to play third. Decent potential bat, has a little bit of speed. Going to be 18 in a couple of weeks. Not a bad candidate. And then Saad Vasquez, another third baseman, durable. Doesn't really have a little better in terms of his range and error than the last guy we looked at. Doesn't really have the arm you'd love in third base. And another guy who looks like, a decent major league bat. So there's some interesting prospects there. I'm going to spend a little time going through some of the other pitching and everyday player prospects just to make sure that I'm not totally letting the star ratings dominate the decision making for me. But before I do that, we'll see what our scouting director recommends. And he says the shortstop, Melvin Armenta. He's definitely in the mix. I like the durability. I really do like the glove, even though I feel real good about him at second base or third base defensively, which is kind of a weird combination, but he's got well above average range and a well above average arm. Just not quite the numbers that I'd love to see for a perfect defensive shortstop, but that said, he can play the position competently at the major league level if he's got these ratings when he gets up to the majors and we get to know him better. The OSA doesn't think his arm and his turn double play ratings are quite as good as our scout does, but our scout is better, and our scouting accuracy from our scout is better. The home run power is definitely attractive. I mean, a good defensive shortstop who could hit 40 home runs a season, even if the batting average is not that great, is definitely an asset in Colorado. So I get why he is the recommendation from our scout, but I'm going to do a little more scouting on my own before making this decision. And ultimately, this is going to be a decision for me between Armenta and Dunbar. Melvin Armenta, like the durability, like the really good glove. He definitely can play any position in the infield. And he can definitely play any position in the infield except for shortstop at a, I won't say excellent, but well above average defensive level. And even shortstop, he's an above average defensive catcher. He's just not perfectly ideal. As I said, if that range and error rating were just a tick higher at around 70, I'd feel even better about him. Obviously, if he has higher ratings, I would feel better about him. But going to be a player who's out there 150 games a year, most likely, playing real good defense, and potentially hitting 40 home runs for us in Colorado, drawing a fair amount of walks, not striking out all that much, and hopefully hitting decent contact. Doesn't have a ton of gap power, doesn't have a ton of speed, but he's clearly a pretty valuable player. The OSA ratings for him are a little bit lower on the home run power, a little higher on the eye, a little lower on the defensive ratings. But as I said earlier, I have a lot of confidence in our scout. So he is an awesome prospect, I think, for 29th in the draft. But so is Jaden Dunbar, also durable. 18-year-old left-handed pitcher, has the stamina to start, potentially has a 3-pitch arsenal with a little bit better average than average stuff and really good movement and control. And with that ground ball pitching tendency and the ground baller pitching type, he's just exactly what we're looking for as far as a pitching prospect. And you don't know how often you're going to find a guy who kind of checks all the boxes that you're looking for in terms of your prospects, in terms of a ground baller pitcher type, ground ball tendencies, durability, and really good movement. So I really like him a lot as well. I'd gotten the suggestion from Patrick DeBonis in comments to focus, obviously, on this type of pitchers when they're available, and also bring coaching into the minor league system that focuses on the ground ballers that we're looking for Colorado. So I do feel like Dunbar is a great player to bring on board into the system and start feeding the beast of the type of pitchers that we're trying to develop. That being said, Armenta is a really interesting prospect also. A really good defensive player, as we talked about, with potentially great power, which is going to play incredibly in Colorado, and a pretty decent bat overall. Not exceptional, but with that, if he gets to be an average contact hitter, an average at avoiding strikeouts, with a plus in his ability to draw walks and a plus in his ability to hit home runs, a guy who's out there every day playing really good defense, just has a lot of value. And as I said, even if he doesn't end up as a shortstop, absolutely can play second base or third base at a very proficient level in the majors. So as much as my tendency is to go with pitchers, and as much as I hate to not bring on a pitcher who kind of checks all the boxes that I think I'm looking for, I just feel that Melvin Armenta is a perfect everyday player for what we're looking for. Well, not perfect, but for the 29th pick in the draft, a guy who should be able to hit above 240 with 40 homers a year, playing really good defense and being out there 150 games a year, while playing that very good defense, maybe at shortstop, but if not, at second base or third base, which are also important defensive positions. There's just a lot of value there. And I feel like over the last few years in the draft, as well as in international amateur free agency, kind of had a focus on arms and a focus on pure bats. The one guy that I can think of that we drafted near the top of the draft who was kind of a glove was Israel Cota with the number 11 pick 2 years ago, whose bat just never really developed, and glove didn't end up being as good as I hoped it was, and we ended up trading him away in that deal where we brought on Mr. Moore, who's having a great season for us. But I feel like a guy who's a good bat with a really good glove here towards the bottom of the first round is the way that we got to go. So I hate not bringing on Jaden Dunbar. I'm definitely waffling on this one. But I think that a everyday shortstop with good durability who can hit 40 home runs and play above average defense and possibly excellent defense at second base or third base, if that's where he ends up, is just a really valuable player. So we're going to go ahead and meet that demand and bring Melvin Armenta on board. Would love to hear what others of you would have done in this decision. It's a rare decision for me to not take the pitcher, and I'm pretty confident we won't be seeing Dunbar when we're picking next, but got to make the call. And here with our second pick towards the end of the second round, looks like pitchers have been the ones that have been going. There's really nothing all that interesting for a second rounder as far as a pitcher available. You can see a couple of the guys that we looked at in the first round. Alex Pineda, the catcher, still available. He's got a decent bat, and I think he's a decent backup catcher, but in a perfect world, I want my catchers to have above average catcher ability. So even though there's certainly better value for him here in the second round than the first, don't think I'm going to go there. Saad Vasquez, certainly a more interesting prospect in the second round than the first also. He's durable, 17 years old, could have a slightly above average bat, like the high work ethic in terms of hopefully reaching his full potential. Issue is he's really a first baseman with those defensive ratings and his 6'6" size. Don't love playing him at second because of the range and the error rating. Don't love playing him at third because of the poor arm. Certainly don't love playing him at second with that poor turn double play rating. And he actually could be a decent corner outfielder. You'd love to see more range, and the average arm means he's probably best off in left, but at least the balls that he can get to, he's going to handle with that excellent error rating. So he's a first baseman / left fielder / DH, and I just don't know if the bat is enough given the positions that he's going to have to play at the major league level. And then the first 2 3-star guys who are available, a couple of center fielders, are also the ones who intrigue me the most among this list of batters. Felix Candelaria, center fielder, 18 years old, normal injury proneness, looking for $1.4 million. Good work ethic and adaptability. Decent defensive outfielder. Could play him in center. You'd feel real good about playing him in left, and decent about playing him in right, although you'd prefer a bigger arm. But with that range and error rating, can play him in center, but he's not perfect defensively. Does have some speed, though, and he does have the gap power to take advantage of it. Not going to strike out much. Interesting prospect. And the other is center fielder Jerry Cherry. Also coming out of high school, looking for about the same amount of money, $1.5 million. Durable as far as his injury proneness, has a high work ethic. Similar-ish defensive ratings, but he's also apparently played some first base over the course of his career. 6 feet tall, so kind of on the low end of what you'd love to see for a first baseman, but honestly has really good range and an error rating and an arm. If it wasn't for that poor turn double play rating, could almost be a second baseman. Also has some speed, doesn't have quite the same gap power as Candelaria has, but they're very similar prospects. You can see they're both lefties, 5'11", 6 foot, weigh 170 pounds, both durable 18-year-olders with, or actually Candelaria is not durable, but 18-year-olders with high work ethic, looking for about the same money. I think I'm going to go with one of them. Just want to stack them right up against each other because they're such similar players and such similar prospects. Contact potential is the same. The gap power favors Candelaria. Home run power favors Cherry. Eye potential is the same, and avoid strikeouts favors Candelaria. So it's kind of a push in my view, although Candelaria is better in the gap power and avoid strikeouts. Those are probably the two primary batting ratings I care about the least. And the 10-point advantage for Jerry Cherry in the home run power kind of puts him over to me. But you can see how similar they are when you look at the comparable player list for both of these guys. It's the exact same players at this stage in their career. So they are very similar. And then the running speed does favor Candelaria. Stealing bases, a little bit of a favor for Cherry, but base running instincts favor Candelaria. So they're very similar. And then defensively, it's kind of the same situation. The range favors Candelaria, and the error in the arm ratings favor Jerry Cherry. So they're just incredibly similar prospects. I think the defense, particularly with those infield ratings and the fact that he could be a pretty good defensive first baseman, probably favor Cherry a little bit, even though I don't think he's quite as good as a center fielder simply because of that lower range. But they both have potential interesting bats. They both have the high work ethics that I've talked about. Where did these other guys come from? Are these guys still available? Huh. Alright, scouting. Did I not see these guys? I gotta be looking at... Okay, I'm looking at OSA ratings right now. Trying to figure out why are there these 5-star guys available who I have not been looking at, but I must have switched it to OSA ratings. Okay. I will be less confused now when I look at that because, I had looked at Rich Ladner when I looked at all these 3-star guys and felt like, not that great defensively. A little less interesting to me offensively than those center fielders, and he's also almost 19 years old. Just wanted to make sure I hadn't completely screwed something up. So our scout is saying to go with Alex Pineda, the catcher, but that catcher ability just doesn't excite me. And he can play other positions, but, at third base or first base, third base, he's still a liability defensively, and first base, he just doesn't have enough of a bat. So I think I'm going to go with Jerry Cherry. If he develops, it's going to be fun to say his name because of the rhyming. And I just think he's a pretty clean prospect. He's durable. He's got the high work ethic. He's not an ideal center fielder, I admit that. But I think with the potential for his bat, if it fully develops, I think he's useful even as a corner outfielder who can kind of be a backup center fielder for hopefully someone who's better defensively when that guy needs a day off or is injured. Not looking for all that much money. I don't love him, but as a second rounder, I think it is a pretty interesting option. And we lost our third round pick this year for bringing Javi Toledo on board, so our next pick is here in the fourth round. So it's going to be a very different universe of options than we've looked at in the past, but we'll let you know what we decide to do. Looks like there are a lot of catchers out there, which could be an interesting direction to go. And here in the fourth round, we're going to get our poor man's version of the pitcher we almost took in the first round. Eddie Tiscareno, almost 19 years old. He's committed to Ohio State, but definitely is signable, looking for $750,000. Ground ball or pitcher type, ground ball pitcher, only throws in the low 90s, and he's almost 19 years old, but does profile as someone with really good movement, those ground ball tendencies, high leadership, certainly has the stamina to start. Hold runner rating is excellent. The question is, he's got a potential 4-pitch arsenal. If the changeup doesn't develop, it's a 3-pitch arsenal of pretty average pitches. So we're banking a lot on the ground ball tendencies and the good movement, and really kind of hoping that maybe he's better in terms of his potential than we think he is. But as a guy to kind of bring into the system in the fourth round, I think he's a decent option for us. So we are going to bring on Eddie Tiscareno here in the fourth round of the draft. And we're going to go with another pitcher here in the fifth round, Andres Reynoso, who's a left-handed reliever, 18 years old, durable, ground baller pitcher type, ground ball tendencies, decent movement on his pitches. Question is going to be his control, but certainly looks like he could potentially be a useful major league left-handed reliever if he fully develops, who kind of fits the profile of a player that we're looking for. So for the fifth round, we're at the point where beggars can't be choosers in the draft, and I think that Andres Reynoso is a decent prospect to bring into our system. And as we come out of the draft, realized that I hadn't mentioned that we did end up signing our international amateur free agent, Roger Gonzalez. So he is at our international complex right now, but good to have that bat on board. And now the job is to see if we can get these draftees signed. We did in the sixth and the eighth round go with guys who are looking for much more than slot. Given that we are in a difficult financial situation, we don't have a ton of flexibility, but the fact that we did go with Armenta in the first round, whose demand is well below his slot, probably going to give us an opportunity to get these guys signed and on board. Well, we'll now find out if our acquisition of Alex Alvarez made sense, because Victor Gonzalez, our starting catcher, is out with a torn quad for 6 weeks. So the hope is that maybe we pick up a little bit of extra defensive ability, having Alvarez on board instead of him. The team has definitely been struggling coming out of the All-Star break with 4 straight losses. So we played well until the All-Star break, continued the great run that we had through May and June into the early stages of July, but things have kind of turned over the last 4 games, and you can see we're actually a game and a half behind the Dodgers now in the division. We're not even in the first wild card spot at this point, so we've it's a very tight race for the best record in baseball and the best record in the National League between the Marlins and the Mets in the NL East and the Dodgers and us here in the NL West. 2 of those teams are likely to end up as wild cards, but certainly no guarantees. But the race has gotten a lot tighter with those 4 losses in a row, and certainly with about 2 weeks until the trade deadline, although we don't have cash to do anything, does potentially increase the urgency around making some kind of move. But at least we're kind of a bit ahead of the game in terms of the catcher position. Tony Padilla, our center fielder, is also banged up with a strained rib cage for 1 week. Minimal impact on hitting and running, but he is fragile, so we're going to have to make a little bit of a decision there. We can clearly move Robbie Carrillo into center field if we need. He continues to have an excellent year for us, hitting .332 with 26 homers here in the middle of July. So after that awful 4-game sweep at home against the Dodgers, we did take 2 out of 3 against the Mets, and then we split a 4-game series with Arizona. Got 4 games on the road against the Dodgers coming up right now, and then 3 games against the Padres before we get to the trade deadline. Clearly would be great if we could turn the tables on the Dodgers and sweep them at Chavez Ravine like they did to us in Coors, but I think that's a pretty low probability scenario, but certainly would love to take 3 out of 4 on the road against the Dodgers to tighten up the division race, because we had a home wild card game last year, our home wild card series last year, and we lost 2-0 to the Giants. Our goal is clearly to ensure that we've got one of the 2 best records in the National League, and that we've got a division title on top of that, which will guarantee us a first round bye. And I think that's absolutely still the goal, even though the Dodgers have kind of quickly taken the division lead away from us by virtue of that sweep a week and a half ago. And unfortunately, after winning the first game on the road against the Dodgers, we then lost 3 in a row by 1 run in extra innings, 1 run, and then 2 runs, so they were close games. Did bounce back today with a win against the Padres, but some more injury issues beginning to have an impact on us, unfortunately. We're at the situation now where it's going to be important to figure out what, if anything, we're going to do as we approach the trade deadline, given that it's just 3 days away. Dave Alvarado, our erstwhile ace, 10-7 this year with a 4.80 ERA. Mild shoulder inflammation that's going to have a moderate impact on his throwing for a couple of weeks. Clearly not going to take any risks with him, so we are going to place him right on the IL. And then good old Uncle Nakahara, who's been basically coming off the bench for us this year with his wrecked physical proneness, has been pretty productive, 314 average and 6 homers in 70 at-bats, as a pinch hitter basically for us from time to time, but the back tightness is going to impact him for a week. Have to decide whether or not we're going to throw him on the IL. But before we make any of those decisions, going to kind of see what, if anything, is available in the trade market. And the issue, of course, is that we don't really have any money to bring on anybody. So we're going to have to find likely someone in the last year of their contract who's either not making much money or whose team is willing to keep all of their contract if we give them some decent prospects. So I'm not sure there's going to be something for us to do, but we certainly need to investigate it since we are a win-now team, despite the fact that we've been below average here in the month of July. And as we try to plan out where to potentially go in the trade market, as I mentioned, we have been below average here in July with an 11-12 record. For the year, we're still definitely better at home, 33-18, than on the road, where we're barely over 500. First in the NL in runs scoring. Strike out a lot, and we're not very good base runners, but otherwise we are, and we're middle of the pack in steals and walks. Otherwise, we're first in pretty much every offensive category. Thank you, Coors. Runs allowed, we've dipped down a little bit to 12th. Starters ERA is 11th. Bullpen ERA is 6th. Never going to have great numbers pitching half of our games in Colorado. Zone rating is good. Defensive efficiency is bad. And our Pythagorean record, fortunately, I guess, is 2 games better than where we are. So from that perspective, can argue that maybe as mediocre as we've been in July. Hopefully we're a little bit better than that. I would think that pitching is the obvious place that we would go to look for some help in the trade market. It's just a matter, as I talked about earlier, of whether we can afford what's available and then if we actually want what's available. And we have been looking at the pitchers available. We tried to get perhaps the greatest pitcher of all time, Rogelio Loera, who's on the trade market from the Rangers. He's 7-4 this year with a 3.76 ERA. Still has 192 strikeouts in 139 innings. Going to be 35 shortly. They are clearly looking for more than we can pay for him, and he's obviously making a ton of money, so we would need them to keep all of his contracts, so that didn't work. We also looked at our former pitcher, Andres Eretzeri. Thought he might work, but he's also making a lot of money, and we would need them to keep his whole contract. And he also has a vesting option for next year requiring 25 games started, and he's already started 22 games this year. We would not want that vesting option to kick in, so we'd want to use him out of the bullpen. And with the fact that we also wanted them to keep his entire salary, we were going to have to give up top-end prospects or top-end everyday players or pitchers for him, so that really didn't work either. Thought about Alex Hihar. The demand for him is pretty high, and although he does have good movement on his pitches, he doesn't have ground ball tendencies. Thought that we could potentially weaken the Giants, but they actually, are willing to trade him. It's just they're looking for a lot for him. So I think right now we're going to kind of go the cheap route and pick up Darius McLeod from the Cardinals, who's durable. He is a ground ball or pitcher type with extreme ground ball tendencies, really good movement on his pitches. His stuff is nothing special. And over the course of his career, he's been a pretty average major league pitcher. But with the recent injuries that we've had with two of our starters, Alvarado now and Gutierrez earlier, ending up on the IL, and both of them being out until mid-August at best likely, we don't have any great options in AAA for us. We did just promote a couple guys from AA to AAA, but don't think they're quite ready yet. And even though McLeod is not a great pitcher, he's still better than the options that we have in the minors. So we can get them to keep his whole salary, and we basically just have to send a guy who's injured, who's in the DSL for us at the age of 24, basically organizational filler. So we can basically bring on Darius McLeod for nothing and put him right into our bullpen. Not going to use him as a starter, even though we have recently lost two starters. Going to give that option to some other people. And the hope is that he'll be a little more effective pitching out of our bullpen than he has been as a starting pitcher this year. So we're going to go ahead and complete that trade to bring on Darius McLeod. Ooh, and apparently he's also a popular player, so that's good, although we'll be obviously taking the hit when he likely moves on at the end of this year. And it was only a little bump in fan interest. You can see, even though we haven't been playing as well recently, still close to capacity almost every day, and at capacity more often than not. Revenue per game trending in the right direction, even though we did give the $2 bump to ticket prices. So think that made sense to do, and we are going to bring Mr. McLeod right onto the 26-man roster and then figure out how to fill the hole caused by our ace going on to the injured list. So what we've decided to do is move Tyrone Colbert into the rotation. He hasn't been all that effective as a starter for us, but you can see he only got 5 opportunities in 2049, 7 last year. At this point, he is a guy who's going to be a free agent, and he's looking for pretty big money, close to $11 million a year. So if there's any chance of us bringing him back next year at that kind of money, we're going to need to feel pretty good that he can be a starting pitcher rather than a reliever. So it probably makes sense to give him a few more chances out of the rotation over the next couple of weeks. You can see the addition McLeod is going to step right in as one of our setup guys. Omar Jones still the closer, although his numbers this year are not nearly what we would have hoped for from him. But hopefully we can stabilize things a little bit over these last couple days of July. I don't know that there's anything else that we really need to do or can do. I think we've helped the pitching a bit. Would obviously love to win these next couple games against San Diego and salvage a winning record for the month of July and go into August feeling like we have a little bit of momentum. But clearly the division is going to, well, I don't know if it's going to ultimately come down to us and the Dodgers, but if it does come down to us and the Dodgers, the fact that we are 1-7 against the Dodgers in the course of July, or were 1-7 against the Dodgers in the course of July, is going to be a pretty big factor if they continue to help us out, because 3 games out, if we had simply gone 500 against the Dodgers, we'd be tied with them instead of 3 games behind them. So we will see if we can win these last couple games against the Padres, hopefully clarify to them that we are the second best team in the division, and then hopefully have an opportunity to chase down the Dodgers over the last weeks of the season. But we are going to also put Nakahara on the IL just out of an abundance of caution, given that he's basically a backup outfielder for us. Not the end of the world to lose him, although he has been very effective as a pinch hitter. We do have plenty of potential bats down in AAA with major league experience, notably Manlio Melinhos and Jose Brito, who have been Rule 5 picks of us in the past. Manlio Melinhos is the guy that we're going to bring up now, another left-handed hitting outfielder to fill that role. And he's been hitting .331 this year in AAA. He hit .343 for us last year in 213 at-bats when he brought him on as a Rule 5 guy out of AA. So certainly think the bat that he provides off the bench doesn't have the same type of power that we would be getting from Uncle Nakahara, but certainly a proficient bat at the major league level in terms of being able to make contact and get on base and hit some extra base hits. So happy to see a little bit of what he can do, because particularly if we do move on from Nakahara this offseason and potentially also move on from Jamel Cohen this offseason, those are the types of moves that should help open up a roster spot next year for the 24-year-old Melinhos to be on the roster for us every day. And we did end up taking both of those last two games against the Padres. Robbie Carrillo hit for the cycle in a 13-1 win yesterday. So that did salvage for us the winning record for the month of July. 1-7 against the Dodgers, and we were 12-5 against every team not known as the Dodgers. Unfortunately, the Dodgers are the team that we are now chasing in the division, so the 1-7 record against them is particularly painful. Obviously, hasn't been too long since we checked in here, so the offense is still excellent. Pitching staff 12th in runs allowed, 63 wins. According to the Pythagorean, we should have 65, given that we've scored 634 runs and allowed 509. So we're pretty positive differential of 125 runs on the season, which in 108 games is a pretty nice number to be at. So as we finish up the month of July, we're one game behind the Dodgers at this point. We've won 3 in a row. They've lost 2 in a row, so definitely in the battle for the division. And still in the battle for the best record in baseball. Right now it's the Marlins at 66-44. We would be 2 games behind them if we were in the same division. So absolutely winning the NL West is in play. Absolutely having the best record in the National League is in play. And having the best record in baseball is obviously in play, since right now at least the 4 best teams in baseball are all in the National League, with the Mets, the Marlins, the Dodgers, and our Rockies. So July was a busy month. Like the international amateur free agent we got, I think we did add some talent in the draft. Picked up a catcher, picked up a reliever, and now we've got to see what we can do over the rest of the year. I don't think there's any other trades we're going to make here today. Haven't had any new injuries. Alvarado and Nakahara hopefully will be back in the not too distant future. Gutierrez should be right behind Alvarado. We did bring up Chris Rodriguez, a veteran from AAA, who is filling in as our backup behind Alex Alvarez now. Alvarez certainly, with that great defense, if he can hit anywhere near 286 with a homer every 12 at-bats for us, he would be an incredibly valuable player. I'm certainly not expecting him to hit like that, but think that that trade could definitely work out for us, and he could, at the very least, be a great backup for us next year, but quite possibly is going to be our starting catcher for the next few years, given that we're likely going to be moving on from Victor Gonzalez, and Chris Rodriguez probably will not even accept an assignment to AAA when Gonzalez is healthy, and we may just need to waive him. But he was certainly just a guy that we signed as a minor league free agent back in February. Gave us some depth in AAA, and that depth is paying off now that we've got a pretty good personality catcher with plus defensive ability and at least a respectable major league bat for us up at the major league level, given the injury to Gonzalez. So I'm going to investigate the trade market quickly one last time, but I don't really think there's going to be much for us to do, or much that we can even do. And after looking through the players that are available on the trade block and addressing the issue that we basically need any player that we bring on board to have their contract completely retained by their existing club, I just don't think there's anything else that we can do or that we should do. We'd have to give up like big time prospects or big parts of our lineups for pitchers who might help us a tiny bit. It just doesn't seem the way to go. And we should have, God willing, Alvarado, Gutierrez, and Nakahara back by mid-August. Maybe Gonzalez by the time we get to September roster expansion. And hopefully we don't have any other significant injuries, and the team can hopefully be firing on close to all cylinders as we get close to the playoffs. We're definitely in the battle for the division. We're definitely in the battle for the best record in baseball. Not as well positioned as we were at the start of July, unfortunately, as we are today. But we're 3.5 games up on the third wild card spot, and we're 7.5 games up on just missing the playoffs in general. So obviously the goal is to do more than just make the playoffs and host a wild card game like we did last year. And there's obviously not even a guarantee that we'd be hosting a wild card game, because if the Mets, well, I mean, we're basically tied with the Mets essentially. We're a percentage point ahead of them, but we could very easily be in that second wild card position, which would mean that we would likely be on the road at either the Mets or the Marlins, depending on how the season played out. So I feel pretty confident that we're going to be a playoff team for a second consecutive season with these Rockies, which will be good. But clearly the goal over the final month and a half of the season is going to be to get this team into a position where at the end of September we are getting close to a week off at the end of the regular season to get our rotation right, and hopefully have other teams beating up on each other in a 3-game, potentially wildcard series. So I think the goal is clear. I think there's nothing else that we can do. I like our lineup. We did a lot in the off season. We've done a little bit this month with those 2 trades to get the team moving in the right direction. Carrillo fighting for a batting title. Elijah Moore and Robbie Carrillo, the 2 additions, 2nd and 3rd in the league in homers. Carrillo 2nd in OPS. Carrillo 2nd in batter WAR. Javi Toledo, the free agent addition, continues to be 3rd in the National League in wins. So the guys that we added this offseason have been real important players for us, and hopefully they'll continue to produce over the last couple months of the season. And we'll find out whether or not they're able to achieve that in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.